So the questions are these. How can we really activate the best of the private sector to meet the challenges of the real world? Is there a way to accelerate my career that doesn't involve boring online or classroom courses? And can I really impact people in the developing world with the skills that I have? Can I finally feel proud of what I know? Those are the questions, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Philippa White, and this is TIE Unearthed. Keep listening, and you can follow us on our journey as we show you how we're connecting the private sector with the social sector to make change. Hello everyone, Philippa White here, and welcome to episode 22 of TIE Unearthed. Now today I'm speaking with my friend, mentor and guide since TIE began, Gib Bulloch. Gib, it is such an honor to be chatting with you today. Hello.
Hello, Philippa. I thought you were going to say since time began, but I feel old. I feel old, but not that old. It's a pleasure to be here.
It did sound a bit like that, didn't it? No, listen, I'd like to tell people a little bit more about you because you're an incredible person. You've done some incredible things, and I just think it's important that everyone knows that. So Gib Bulloch is an award-winning social intrapreneur who consults, writes, and speaks on a range of topics relating to the role of business in society. Now, his first book, The Intrapreneur, Confessions of a Corporate Insurgent, which was written in 2018, is a personal story of his 15-year journey to create and scale Accenture's global not-for-loss consulting business, Accenture Development Partnerships. Now, this innovative venture attracted significant media attention, won Accenture International Awards for Corporate Social Responsibility, and Gib himself was voted the UK's Management Consultant of the Year in 2008. Now, this is what we're going to be talking about today, basically the power of business to change the world and how we get there. And as Gib says, changing the world is not an impossible dream, not if we're successful in changing the world of business. I love that. So Gib, I've got so many questions for you. I absolutely adored reading your book. So let me start with my first one. Now, I remember our first meeting like it was yesterday, and I'm saying this one. I know that, obviously you remember this, but for our listeners to understand just how important you are in my life and Ty's life. Julian Love, who was an Accenture employee at the time, he put us in touch. It was 2004. And I remember I'd stepped out of work at BBH where I was working at the time, and I called you in a square just off of Bond Street. I remember the square, and I called and I felt really nervous, and I sort of dialed your number and I said, "Hi, Gib," and I explained my Thai idea to you, and you very graciously agreed to meet up with me. So a few days later, we were face to face. I remember we were in a pub close to Accenture. It was about 5 p.m. and you walked in wearing a gray suit, and I just went on to explain my idea for Thai, and you so kindly took your time telling me about ADP, helping me learn from everything that you've been through or that you had been through in the previous years. Can you tell people about your baby, which is ADP, and your career epiphany that started this incredible movement?
Crumbs. Well, what a warm introduction, Philippa. Thank you very much indeed. After that, I can hardly wait to hear what I've got to say after that. I appreciate it. And I do remember that meeting, that first meeting all these years ago. And to be honest, I was very early on in the journey that I'd been going on. So the very quick kind of précis history is I had joined what was at the time Anderson Consulting. It became known as Accenture. I joined there in '96. I wasn't trying to save the world at that point. I was trying to have a sports car and a gold card in the luggage and all the other KPIs of the things that would make us successful, and on some levels achieved these things, but was wondering by the late '90s, is this it? Is there something more that I could and should be doing? I just didn't feel ultimately fulfilled. And the epiphany, as I describe it, was actually a very simple reading an article in the Financial Times on my way to work. It was not the road to Damascus, it was the district line, I think, on the way to a client in the city. And it was VSO, the volunteering charity, needing business people. They had enough doctors and nurses and teachers and things. They needed more business people, and they wanted to partner with large corporates. So it was an idea that was ahead of its time. They partnered with companies, borrowed their people for 6 months or so, and within a year, I found myself in what's now called Northern Macedonia in the Balkans, and it was just after the Kosovo War. So Macedonia sits next door to Kosovo, and I was in a 90-something% salary reduction from the kind of mega bucks fast lane of business that I'd been getting used to. But I was more motivated than I'd ever been in my life, but probably not having that much of an impact, if I'm totally honest. And in the long winter nights in Macedonia, I was thinking, how much more could I get done with my normal team of people? Is there a business model to really industrialize this? Mm-hmm. If I was happy and motivated on a massive salary reduction, maybe people would work for a lower salary. And that was the genesis, really, of the idea that became known as Accenture Development Partnerships. I came back with fire in the belly. I talk about this in more detail in the book, but with a sort of fake press article about Accenture launching this audacious non-profit, or I prefer to call it not-for-loss business. But it was at the time when big consultancies were doing pro bono, a lot of pro bono, give it away for free to charities on their doorstep, but it wasn't getting business and technology expertise to parts of the world where there was a great need and where there was very little access to these skills. And that was the mission that I set about trying to address and create this business model where there was a contribution from employees in the form of taking a salary reduction. The firm gave up profit, and the charities, the non-profits that we worked for, all the non-traditional clients, if you will, from Accenture, these were organizations we wouldn't normally work with, they paid something, but they paid maybe 10 or 20 pence in the pound, cents in the dollar. And that was it, a scalable, sustainable, not-for-loss business unit. So I'll pause there, but that's it in a nutshell in terms of how we got going. And we launched, I think we piloted 2002, launched 2003. So by the time I saw
so when I met with you, that was literally right at the beginning. Yeah.
Right at the beginning. So I would have had relatively little to tell, but I suppose a year of learnings at that point. And that's why what you were trying to do really resonated with me.
And tell me, just because obviously ADP is still going, obviously, but while you were there and in the so many obviously discussions at the firm, what would you say was the benefit for the firm, supporting an initiative like ADP? Why on earth would a huge consultant company want to do something like that?
And it's a question I get asked often and have been asked often. Why, with a business that's all about making profit, have a non-profit? And I would say that the first generation of the business case, let's say for our first few years, was very much around people. So it was a magnet for attracting and retaining talent. It was a leadership development tool. Yes, there were positive PR benefits in terms of newspapers starting to write nice things about what consultants would do with their supply chain skills and apply them to getting medicines the last mile, or technology, e-learning platforms to train nurses in Kenya. Pretty cool. So people were super motivated. It attracted a disproportionate number of the best performers. Yeah. Many years in, INSEAD did an analysis of what we were doing and found that it actually reduced high performer attrition by 32%, I think, and that was over hundreds of people that they analysed and interviewed. So it was an attraction tool. The interesting sort of second generation business case that wasn't on the cards when we first started was around how we were able to actually extend and enhance the relationship we had with commercial clients. So yes, we were working primarily with the non-profits, but over the course of 2007, 8, 9, 10, people cast their minds back then, we started hearing about things like shared value and inclusive business and sustainability and all these terms that have sort of cropped up over the years. So the likes of the Unilevers or the Coca-Colas or the Barclays were starting to engage in these agendas, starting to look at how we could partner with other organizations. So we started finding that we'd be working with Coca-Cola on their last mile logistics expertise and inventory management expertise and applying it to health systems in Africa.
Yeah.
Or with Barclays on village savings and loans programs, where we'd partner with an NGO funded by Barclays to get, finance the last mile, things like that. Unilever on smallholder farmers with Oxfam. So that was, you never quite know what the benefits will be, but my key point is there needs to be a business case for doing this stuff. It cannot be appealing to the heartstrings of a particular benevolent leader at a particular time, because they move on, they go under the bus, and then you go under the bus with them if you don't have a business case.
Yeah, absolutely. God. So, I mean, just this brings me beautifully to just the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because, many years ago, there was a lot of talk around CSR, corporate social responsibility. And it was, like you say in your book, like it was a very much a secondary strategy to the main part of business, right? So it was sort of the doing good arm. And I remember back in 2005, so we met in around 2004, 2005. At the end of 2005, I quit my job, came to Brazil, started writing the business plan for Thai and sort of making it turn into something. And I remember in about 2006, 2007, I'm back in London talking to companies, and I heard over and over again, sustainability is just not really our priority at the moment. And in the book, you explain how things have moved on significantly since then. And I just have a few questions along this line of thinking. What comes out in the book loud and clear is how it is possible to change the world from inside big business. And actually, it's a huge opportunity. And so the first question I have, just because you also touch on this in the book, and it reminded me, because this happened to me as well in business school. I remember sitting in the classroom at business school and the teacher asking all of us, sort of saying, what's the main goal of business? And then we all had to chant while hitting our fists on the table, to make money. And we had to do that. Well, then it felt so wrong. And I had no business experience at this point. I was just a business student. But what is your response to this? I'd love to know your response to this.
Well, you can imagine what it was like when I was doing my MBA in the early 90s, and there were similar chants, and it always felt wrong to me. And yet there is still, to this day, I believe, in many businesses, particularly at the senior levels, this false dichotomy, I would say, between, on one arm we do business, on one hand we do business and it's core business and we make money and we make widgets for profit, and on the other hand we do good. And there's still that sort of belief that these things are mutually exclusive in some way. Mm-hmm. And of course they have to, and they are converging. And so I don't have a problem with businesses making a return on investment, with businesses making a profit. But I do want that to be done with a purpose. And I do think that businesses are increasingly having to articulate what that purpose is. If you today want to attract and retain the top performing talent from these business schools around the world, you need to have a story beyond just how much money you're going to pay them. And it's my firm belief that in the old days, you talked about CSR, corporate responsibility, when we had this kind of black and white between the doing good and doing business, and we had a few people in a CSR department doing the good. It's my firm belief that actually these things that we've traditionally called CSR or charity stuff or philanthropic stuff, the Sustainable Development Goals is the latest incarnation, the latest proxy. These are huge untapped opportunities for business. We're just really talking about how we how we feed and nourish the next billion that are coming onto the planet, and they are coming already. They're already born. They are coming. We need to provide them with clean energy, with access to education, with access to water and sanitation, you name it. These are, yes, the UN goals, but they are, it's estimated, a $13 trillion opportunity for business to engage by 2030 to achieve these goals. There's a paper I can share for your notes on that by the UN Business Commission. So let's reframe these things as opportunities. Let's reinvent business models. Let's rethink profit and shareholder maximization in the short term to look about shareholder optimization, stakeholder optimization in the longer term rather than a short-term view.
Yeah. And I mean, Mark Carney, his book's coming out, has come out now, I think, isn't it? Which is, it's about values, not value, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. And in that, I just heard him speak on another podcast, not as good as yours, obviously. But, you know, this nonsense about, he compares Amazon and the value of Amazon versus the Amazon.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Fascinating, you know, and the Amazon we don't put a value on at all.
Yeah.
Until we cut down the trees and we ship the timber, which is, you know, and destroy the planet at the same time. Yeah. Whereas Amazon is very easy to value, and it's, you know, it's a new, what I'd call superstate. It's a part of, you know, it touches most of our lives. It's enormous. And with size, I think, comes responsibility. And businesses, this is the notion that if we can change the world by changing business, you know, give me 1 degree shift in that supertanker called Amazon, the Bezos version, you know, let alone a 5% or a 10% shift. That can have massive impact on so many things. If we took the North Star away from being a small number of short-term investors to being the benefit of society. So I think we could talk about this, but I think there's going to be more democratization starting to come into corporations, where people have a greater say in what these organizations do and who they serve and how they're served. And if that means unlearning a lot of the received wisdom that we've had in our MBAs and our business school teachings, then so be it.
Yeah. Now, you talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, and as we know, I'd like to think it's not sort of the next big thing that people, I don't know, the next flavor of the month, which is obviously the ESGs, right? So the corporate ESGs, environmental, social, and governance goals that now all these companies are working towards, which is obviously helping to reach these sustainable development goals for the 2030 agenda. And I'd like to think it's sort of, there's so much potential. I mean, I find it fascinating, first of all, that your book was written in 2018. So this is way before ESGs are being talked about, but it kind of feels like now people are coming up to where your brain was at and sort of, well, way before then, but being articulated in the book in 2018. Because this is where I feel like there's a lot of financial directors out there and CEOs who are saying, okay, well, we need to kind of get our strategies. We need to get these ESG strategies together, but what's the benefit to us? How can this now turn into something that can not just be a strategy, but how can this sort of benefit us? But okay, maybe we do need to find ways of this benefiting the world. And I wonder, what would you say to listeners out there who are pulling together these strategies of ESGs? And yeah, I'd love to know what you think around the ESGs.
Sure. Well, this is a topic that's been close to my heart for obviously a very, very long time. Maybe we were slightly at the bleeding edge of this stuff. The book may have come out in 2018. It was written between 2015 to 17, I guess. And actually, a lot of the stuff I put in the book was stuff that had been written in technical papers, in the 5 to 10 years previous to that, talking about this convergence, talking about a fourth sector emerging, a new sector that brings the best of the business world and the best of the DNA of the non-profit world and creates new business models, new platforms that can address these ESGs or SDGs or whatever you want to call them. So I think besides the real and tangible value, untapped value, I believe that there are in the things that I've mentioned. That is, that the strategy for business really needs to look deeply into where money can be made in solving social and environmental problems. But the second thing I think is the shift in power that is starting to take place from the top of business down and outwards. I believe we're starting to see, I alluded to this idea of democratization of these new G20 player massive multinationals. We're seeing things like Google through its parent Alphabet, the Alphabet Workers Union. Now, who would have thought that? The Alphabet Workers Union is not talking about safety and terms and conditions and pay. Google, I think the median salary is over $400,000 a year. They're paid perfectly well.
Yeah.
It is about business ethics. It is about more employees wanting to have a greater say in what Google does, what it doesn't do, who it serves, how it does it. And that, for me, is the thin end of what's going to be a very thick wedge that businesses really need to take significant notice of and be ahead of the curve and anticipate this coming and have an authentic story to tell about what it is and why they should exist in the world and what they are doing to make the world a better place, rather than just, short-term rent seeking or profit seeking.
Yeah. What constitutes value, right? And what...
Well, exactly. And profit is a natural outcome. Shareholder value can be a natural outcome of serving customers and solving some of these social and environmental problems. But it shouldn't be the purpose of business in itself, in my view. It should be an outcome.
So I can't help but ask you, from your point of view, I mean, obviously you're very familiar with the Thai model because it's not dissimilar to ADP's model. The specifics as to how it works and who pays the bills and all that kind of stuff is slightly different. But as far as the simple connecting the private sector with the social sector around the world to create change, but also to be used as a catalyst to then unlock different thinking. Why is this important in your mind?
Well, of course, I'm going to come on your podcast and I'm going to say nice things about Thai, but I genuinely believe what you're doing is super important, and it's so similar to what we were doing. Beyond the benefits that I talked about for the individuals, what you're talking about is exposing people to international experiences, often cross-cultural experiences, cross-sector experiences. Somebody said, and I don't know who the quote is from, but I like it, if you want people to think out of the box, then they have to first have lived out of the box. And we are in such a myopic business context where we've had our heads down delivering last year's KPIs and performance objectives that we were given or handed down by us, and we see things through these blinkers. And when you have an experience like Thai, where people can go out there and really open their minds and have a chance and space to think differently about their role, think differently about what they can do, and the agency they have to drive change in their organization, it's crucially important. So there is a massive benefit to business in doing this. You are basically sort of tapping into the sort of internal Elon Musks and Muskesses that will exist within your organization and sort of activating them. It's like pollinating them in some way to be innovators. And innovation, social innovation, environmental innovation is going to be the hallmark of success in tomorrow's business.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is hugely strategic and hugely important.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that, but obviously it was a bit of a leading question. I would love to know if there's a story, and obviously you were running ADP for a very long time at Accenture, and I'm sure there's lots of them, but is there a story that stands out in your mind of someone who had been on an ADP? I mean, you're obviously one example of what happened when you did an experience like this, but from one of the people on one of your cohorts who did an experience, found themselves in a completely different part of the world, had their minds blown, had exposure to things that they wouldn't normally have had exposure to, that cultural intelligence part of it. Their, necessity is the mother of invention. The obstacle is the way. They come back and then they do something at Accenture. Is there a story that stands out for you?
That's a good question, which I wasn't anticipating, and I'm probably going to slightly duck it because I won't pull out any one individual. I'll answer it a couple of different ways. There were many people who went away and did an experience, came back and worked for a year and went and did a second project, a third project. I think some even did a fourth project. Some came onto our management team. I was lucky enough to have the pick of the bunch, and so it became a sort of hybrid career option for many people, where they could stay within the firm, not leave the firm. This is where the attrition was reduced. They could have the best of both worlds: keep your pension going, keep your tenure with the company going, keep your skills and your training going, but you feel like you're having a real impact on something that's important to you. Whether that's working in Africa, whether it was working, in closer to your home office at the headquarters of an NGO. It didn't always have to be a developing, quote unquote, or southern country that they were going to.
And I mean, now that brings me to the next thing that I actually wanted to talk to you about. How about these people that are running these companies? And I'm not talking about the CEOs or the people in the C-suite roles. I'm talking about all of these people that are giving their everything to these companies so that they can function. And you talk in the book about how the landscape of talent is changing. And you touched on it just now about how at Accenture, people were able to almost have that, the best of both worlds, actually. How there's obviously a huge part of them that really wanted to make that difference. And they could do that with doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ADP projects. What would you say the majority of people are looking for now? And obviously you felt it however long ago, and I do now, and I did too then. But why is it important for companies to truly understand these dynamics? What are these dynamics?
I sometimes say that I think I was a millennial trapped in this Gen X body before my time. But if you read reports into what millennials want, Gen Y, and I know everyone projects, what they want that generation to say or believe in line with their agenda, but the neutral surveys, the Deloitte's millennial survey and things like that, will tell you that there is a fundamental shift, I think, happening where people are, the old levers of motivation around paychecks and bonuses and things like that are diminishing in their power, and having people feeling that they are making a difference on something that they care about, feeling that they are part of something bigger than themselves, and through their day job are able to influence something. That is something that I believe is much more the norm now than it was 10, 20 years ago during my generation, when it was headline salary. And I definitely include myself in that in the late 90s. Things shifted for me based on the experience I had in Macedonia. Mm-hmm. But now people are coming into the workplace wanting different things. And I believe that any company worth its salt will need to be aware of that and accommodate that. And many companies are changing their hiring strategies, their what they're doing with these people.
What would you say is the power or the potential of this untapped resource?
Well, I talk about intrapreneurship. My book's called The Intrapreneur, after all. So
And what is an intrapreneur? Perhaps perhaps you can define that for what is an intrapreneur? What is the epitome of an intrapreneur in your mind? What is
an intrapreneur? And apologies to any of your French listeners for the twisting of their language. It wasn't my fault. I didn't make up the term. But we know what an entrepreneur is. We've become accustomed to talking about social entrepreneurs. So social entrepreneurs are people that have business solutions to a particular social or environmental problem. Their challenge has always been scale, I would say. Great social entrepreneurs doing great things, but there's a handful of examples that have really scaled. Intrapreneurs take that social entrepreneur and have them inside a big business. I mean, they're inside a big business. They're working as an employee. They're not in the CSR department. They're, any gender, any department, and someone who's prepared to be entrepreneurial and stand up for what they believe in and drive small change inside a large organization. Probably my favorite example of an entrepreneur, and there are many, but Vodafone, a guy called Nick Hughes, back around about the time that ADP was starting, he had this crazy idea of using mobile phones in Kenya as an alternative bank account. People were swapping airtime minutes as an alternative currency, if you will. And it wasn't an idea that was immediately grasped by leadership, let's just say, but with some support from the UK government's aid arm, they did a pilot, and the rest is kind of history. It's not just in Kenya, but it has revolutionized, mobile banking has revolutionized financial inclusion. That wasn't a philanthropic gesture for Vodafone, it was a new business opportunity. And there are, I believe, so many more opportunities like that as we tap into these SDGs, that employees, if you can unlock the innovation potential of your motivated, best performing employees and come up with more M-Pesa type ideas, that's where the power is. I don't see it as being just in the R&D department or in the accelerator or whatever it happens to be.
I couldn't agree more. And back to my leading question, I just think, I often say in so many of my presentations, the quality of our output is influenced by the inspiration you seek. And if you keep doing the same thing all the time, you're not gonna be able to come up with new ideas or do things in a different way. And just having people have that opportunity to step out of their bubbles and out of their worlds and see how things are done in a different way, and then learn from that, and then come back inspired, but also with that knowledge and understanding of different solutions that people are finding in other parts of the world, and then use that to help your clients or help your company come up with revolutionary solutions. It's just so...
And I should say, Philippa, that this social intrapreneurship movement is gathering pace. There are bodies like the League of Intrapreneurs. I'm involved in that fabulous program.
Yeah.
The Aspen Institute as a program, the First Movers program, the Schwab Foundation of the World Economic Forum is getting into this. There's a new Unusual Pioneers program that Social Businesses is pushing, and these are all about entrepreneurship. So I would encourage business leaders out there to sort of wake up and smell the coffee in terms of what's happening around this, because these networks are gradually moving into a real movement, and it's gathering pace.
Yeah, I love your, there's a quote that we have in one of our documents, because as I've mentioned, well, to you, but to our listeners, I love what Gib is doing in the League of Intrapreneurs and his entrepreneurship movement. Maggie Dupree as well. They're onto something just so powerful. And one of our final documents, we call it the Post-Placement Guide. We have loads of information for people who go through TIE. There's a quote from you, Gib, and it's, social entrepreneurs are 2/3 change maker, 1/3 troublemaker. Get the balance wrong and you're liable to be snuffed out by the corporate immune system. It's almost as if a set of antibodies are unleashed by the parent organization to try and attack anything that doesn't look like it's maximizing short-term profit in the next quarter. And I think that's really nice, because it's tough, it's a challenge, but at the same time, it's what the system needs, and it's not going to be easy, and that's why it's being an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is not easy, but you're having to come up with new solutions, you're having to come up with new ways of doing things, and you just have to find that balance. I mean, do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess so. I think it's fairly subjective whether I was the balance was 2/3 change maker or troublemaker, or the other way around on any given day. And I talk a lot about this. In fact, one of the chapters I think is the corporate immune system.
Yeah, it is.
It's a phrase I've sort of talked about, this invisible kind of force that is trying to keep the status quo, and that is a threat, I think, to the change makers within. And certainly, as you know, Philip, I guess I learned from bitter experience that I was not immune to that myself.
Yeah.
I loved my job, and yeah, it was going well. I was enjoying it. It was super, but I was working longer and longer hours, flying all around the world, doing this job. No space, no gaps. It was fairly crazy. And if this is all sounding like a great podcast and all the successes that I and our team, and I really stress that it was very much a team effort. Intrapreneurship is a team sport. It's not about somebody on a pedestal. I was leading the team, a great team who did amazing things. But then, yeah, the wheels came off somewhat, as you know, in late 2014. Don't know whether you want to go there or...
No, let's go there. Yeah, I mean, talk to us about that, because I think it's important, Yep.
Yeah, well, as I say, we had some great successes in our first 10 years or so. I'd say by 2013, we worked in 80 or 90 countries around the world, $250 million worth of services, and worked with all the big mainstream charities that you would recognize, all the big brands. We were working with them in their back office, front office. It was tremendous. But some of my leadership sponsors had retired or moved on. New CEOs would come in, start asking the questions, why are we doing this in some ways? Warning for people, you can find yourself sometimes having to win an argument 1 year and 5 years later have to re-win the same argument.
Yep.
And it was kind of tough. And I don't really know exactly what caused it, but maybe it was a fever I picked up in India. Maybe it was just the hours and the crazy pace of life I was going on. But I found myself was it a burnout? I don't know. Was it something happened, and I found myself with having a manic episode that landed me in a psychiatric hospital in my native Scotland. Most of you will have detected I'm Scottish by now, I would have thought. Maybe you could some subtitles in this. But, in all seriousness, and I think I got off fairly lightly because it was a short-lived experience, but I did spend 5 days and nights in a psychiatric hospital, a bit like a sort of cameo role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in some ways. And I don't want to in any way be glib or belittle the experience that people that are really struggling with mental health issues in the workplace are having. I was lucky. Others aren't so lucky. It is a pandemic, I would say, in the workplace at the moment, of anxiety, of disengagement, of depression. And I felt one of the main reasons for writing the book hadn't been on the cards until this happened, but it was a precursor to saying, okay, I need to stand up and be counted. We need to talk about this issue. We need to break taboos about this issue. Yes, there's all the other reasons for writing the book that we've been talking about so far and trying to sort of get across my points of view on business and what it can be and a sort of route map for aspiring entrepreneurs, I suppose. But the mental health issue is important. But I guess the angle I'm trying to take on this is that we need to shift the focus away from the individual. We need to have individual responses. We need to, have more fruit on the desk or gym memberships or yoga classes. And it's actually, we need to focus more on the mental health of the institutions and the system in which we're working.
Yeah.
Somebody made a great analogy that I really liked about the canary in the coal mine. People will know that when in days gone by, miners would go down and have a canary in a cage. Not great for animal rights, but if the canary fell over, then you knew there was some toxic gases.
Yeah.
And a large, beefy miner would have a bit longer, but you better get out quick. And I think, we don't blame the canary for not being resilient enough when that happens. We look at why there's a poisonous environment. And that's the analogy for business, I think. Let's look at the system. Let's look at why this is happening to everyone. Maybe what happened to me was a perfectly normal, rational, healthy response to a system that's gone crazy.
Yeah.
And that's my kind of stubborn view. let's fundamentally rethink what companies do, what they stand for, how they do it. And if we start doing that, then we start to address the challenges. And no bar football in the canteen and yoga and things like that is going to solve that problem.
Beautiful. I couldn't agree more. And just to say, I'm so happy that you are well and that you did come out of this actually inspired and obviously doing some amazing new things, which we will get to in a second. I do just have one thing I want to get to before I ask you about what you're doing now. And we mentioned Maggie Dupree just earlier as one of the founders of the League of Intrapreneurs. And I asked her, I think it was in sort of September, I was talking to her about, what we do in relation to the entrepreneurship movement. And I gave her this quote saying, TIE provides you with a new perspective and new insights and gives you the confidence and the knowledge and the abilities you have are powerful to make change. And the idea is inspiring participants to use that drive and energy and new vision to make change and be a change maker at the company they are working at or a company they want to work at in the future. And as I mentioned, we talk a lot about the League of Intrapreneurs and all of our TIE material. And I do believe that the entrepreneurship movement is, or creating entrepreneurs. I mean, that's the obvious next step in this TIE journey. We spark the potential entrepreneur within people. And then the idea is that we then pass the baton onto you guys, basically. And I just wonder, there are a lot of people listening to this podcast who have either been through TIE or, in the future will go on TIE. They will come across this. I'm keen to know, what can you tell people who are listening, who would be keen to just know what's next?
What's next? I think I'd like to think that it is getting easier to be an entrepreneur in a company, that not only are companies waking up, I believe, to the potential, the innovation potential of their people. So I know of many companies now that have entrepreneurship programs. It's an environment that's conducive to stepping out and being creative. Yeah, it's great. The wind is on your back now, whereas it was rather a headwind, I would say, in the past.
Yeah.
There are these various bodies, from the League of Intrapreneurs to the other ones that I've mentioned before, Circle of Young Entrepreneurs, many networks that people can look at, explore. You can maybe have that in your podcast notes, perhaps.
Yeah, I will put those.
Where you've got peer coaching, resilience, helping each other out, lots of ideas. So that it's a fertile ground, I believe, for doing this. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual being prepared to follow that road less traveled, to have the courage. I think leadership is a lot about courage, to break from the herd, to follow that path less traveled, to perhaps put maybe your career progression and pace of it at risk, perhaps put other safer options a bit at risk, but to follow that little voice that's saying, do this, step out, you can do this, and be brave. And so I would very much encourage people to try and get to a place where you're still enough to follow that voice and where it's taking you.
And I would also just like to add, if this resonates with people, what we've said until now with this podcast, I would highly recommend reading your book as well. It's just so honest and funny in so many parts, but provides so much direction and experience in this. And actually, it's full of so many beautiful quotes. Oh my God, I've been quoting so many of the quotes. All of you, if you're listening to this on Friday and you've been seeing me putting quotes over the last couple of weeks, these are from Gib's book. I'm going to say this one just because it's beautiful and it's perfect for what you've just said. It's by an American psychologist, Rollo May. The opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice. It is conformity. And I think that couldn't be more perfect for what, come on, guys, we need to challenge the system. Gib, what are you doing now? I haven't asked, what haven't I asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners as we wrap things up?
I'm certainly trying to get a better pace of life at the moment. I didn't dive straight back into the corporate. I took some time out to write the book and had my own sort of I call it a bit of an eat, pray, love journey, if you will. Yeah. But where it's taken me to is another fairly crazy notion, and it's slight deja vu in terms of people saying this is a crazy idea, but I love it. I'm trying to create a business decelerator on the Isle of Bute, where I grew up in Scotland, and which features in the first few chapters of the book. I've got a derelict farm, trying to bring together and create a retreat centre, not just for slowing down and doing nothing, but to connect business people to music, art, the power of nature, improv, theatre, community, a lot of the right brain stuff that tends to kind of atrophy in business, that we tend to keep separate from what we do in business. So I'm positioning it much more as a sort of innovation centre, a place to really create the soil in which people, entrepreneurs and their ideas can flourish. So that's what I'm trying to do. We're obviously not able to do a lot of physical things at the moment, so we're doing quite a lot online, and there'll be events throughout the year. Next one, 16th of May, but people can go maybe and visit Gib Bulloch. It means jagged rock. That's the name of the farm. So you'll send it out.
I will put it, but if you could just say it here as well, I think, for listeners who don't go into the notes.
Kraigbeeroch, Gib Bulloch. That's the name. It's Gaelic for jagged rock, and that's the business decelerator.
Great. Oh, well, I'm going to put all of, the book, of course, is going to go on the notes. Any intrapreneurship links that you can send me, so I will ask you to send those to me so I can get those onto the notes, and we will obviously put the decelerator, which sounds amazing, on there as well. And I look forward to things opening up for there actually to be physical ones. I'd like to sign up or go. I think that sounds really lovely.
We'd love to have you there.
Yeah.
It's good fun.
Good. Well, listen, Gib, we've come to the end of the podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. I can't help, and also just all of your support ever since the beginning of time, or Thai, as we said at the beginning. I just feel like so much of the basis of Thai came from a lot of your direction and materials and support. So yeah, I am very grateful for your time and for this podcast and for everything. So thank you, Gib.
You're very kind indeed. Thank you. I think I've not had so much effusive praise since I don't think my mother would be able to match you on that. So thank you. Extremely kind, Philippa, and right back at you, as the saying goes. So good. Thanks for it. It's been a great honor to speak to you. Bye for now.
Speak soon. Bye. Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. So this is your chance to get involved with Thai. We have 3 absolutely amazing virtual opportunities available, all rooted in connecting the private sector with the social sector to make change. Thai has never been more necessary than right now. So if you're looking for life-changing leadership development opportunities for your employees and you want your company to impact the world, we've got you covered. If you're looking to step out of your comfort zone and use your skills to make a difference and keen to meet other like-minded professionals with similar values, then our Thai Accelerator program is for you. There are so many options, so I urge you to get in touch. Go to theinternationalexchange.co.uk for more information or just shoot us an email. Better companies, better leaders, better world.